Councillors, can I have your attention, please? Welcome to this meeting of the Town Planning Committee, and I declare the meeting open. We will commence the meeting with the following reflection. I would ask those gathered to join us now for a few moments of silence as we reflect on our roles in this chamber. Please use this opportunity for reflection, prayer, or thought to focus on our shared intention to work respectfully together for the well-being of our whole community. Thank you, everyone. The Cardinia Shire Council respectfully acknowledges that we are on the traditional lands of the Bunurong and Wurundjeri people, and we pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Apologies for tonight's meeting. We do have an apology from Councillor Stephanie Davies, so we'll note that in the minutes. Declarations of interest. I have had one submission from Councillor Owen regarding item 5.2. Councillors, are there any other declarations of interest in relation to tonight's agenda items? No, I note there are none, and thank you, Councillor Owen. We'll come to that when we get to item 5.2. Thank you. On to ordinary business. The items in today's agenda are item 5.1, T230342 PA, use of the land for rural industry, hemp-based mud brick manufacturing at 565 Murray Road, Vervale. The officer recommendation is that Council resolve to issue a notice of decision to grant a permit for planning permit application as above for use of the land for rural industry, hemp-based mud brick manufacturing at 565 Murray Road, Vervale, subject to the conditions listed in the report. Do I have a mover for item 5.1? I see Councillor Jeff Springfield.
I move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Tammy Radford. Councillor Springfield to speak first.
Thank you, Mayor. So this item before us tonight, look, we have had quite a bit of feedback on this item from neighbouring objectors, from the applicant, and over several years of, not this particular application, but of his process of what he's wants to achieve out there, and what the plans and intention are. There's been a lot of discussions in the past, I would say, for our council's benefit. Look, the recommendation before us, reading through the report and the multiple conditions that are set upon it, does seem reasonable to me in making a judgment under the planning scheme, which is what our requirement is to do, is to under the planning scheme as it is set, and is to make a judgment. So I think that this judgment, as presented to us from our council planning department, is in line with that of what I would expect and understand. And so so tonight's meeting, I'm happy to support this moving forward, noting that there has been numerous objections made from neighbouring properties. So yes, but anyway, I'll leave it there. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Springfield. I'll go to your seconder, Councillor Tammy Radford.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Springfield. Yes, as Councillor Springfield said, this has come to Council a few times, and I would like to thank the objectors and note that we have read and considered all of their letters. It does always concern me when there are so many conditions put in place that this planning application will be if this is done and that is done. But when I consider that is not unusual for our planning applications, and we quite often do have to put in conditions that need to be met before anything further goes forward. And I do see that there are some extensive conditions. I also note that attached to this report there was a discussion on trying to determine the definition of a mud brick. So that was great reading, and I'd suggest that everybody have a read of that as well. Like, it's really gotten down to the nitty-gritty of trying to determine whether this application was suitable due to the definition of a mud brick. So I found that very interesting to read all that as well. So as I said, I do have concerns with the conditions, but to be consistent, I have to support that the officer's recommendations and the conditions that they have implied. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Radford. Are there any other councillors? Councillor Moore would like to speak.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Springfield, for withdrawing this, and Councillor Radford for your notes. This is a very difficult situation sometimes, this can be. I mean, I noticed that this has been classed as a rural industry. the growing of the hemp there, which has been a little bit of controversy over the long term. This has been around for many, many years, back from 2012, this started. And I remember it very, very well. So the manufacturing of mud bricks has got down to the situation now where there was a residence there to start with. Now the residence has been pulled out, but I still see the actual shed or the brick making building is still, in my opinion, a factory on a special use zone land. Now that's something I'm having trouble coming to grips with, even though I understand and I accept that this is a rural industry, and that land, that special use zone, has been really laid away for growing crops, eatable crops. And this is not one of those, but it's been deemed as being a rural industry where they can grow the hemp. And I think the water issue is another one where the water, as said, there's no guarantee of water. There is and there isn't. They're very questionable things. But I need to go towards the council staff, the planning staff, who have been through this a few times, and it's a difficult one for them and for us to go through all the red tape that comes with this, because it's actually for horticultural growing, really, that area. But in all respects to the applicant, I can understand that the growing of this hemp and producing this mud brick, which is a hemp type brick for the building industry, will prove as being an industry that may go forward in the area. So I will support this through the planners, my opinion, and I just I say this with heavy heart, where I'm in a debatable question sometimes of where I go and what I say. But in this circumstance, there's not much else I've got that can go against this applicant. His application is the problem. That's where I have to make a decision eventually. As councillors, we're put in that position sometimes, a very difficult position. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Are there any other councillors who would like to speak to this item? I see Councillor Owen.
Thank you, Mayor. I do note how difficult this decision is. I've gone out to the abutting property and I've inspected the application property, had correspondence from the applicant as well. Obviously, this was deferred for further consideration. Some of the additional objections related to potential biohazard impacts of the activity, food and health, safety, risk of hemp dust, with reference to a journal paper assessment of worker exposure to occupational organic dust in a hemp processing facility, authored by Melinda Gardner, Sue Reid and Maggie Davidson, published in 2020. Obviously, that correspondence was forwarded to councillors several weeks ago. In response to the concerns, the officers have advised that the processing of hemp is to be undertaken in an enclosed and ventilated building. All material for the manufacturing process is to be stored inside the building. The cultivation and harvesting of the crop is an activity that does not require planning permission, and a condition of permit requires the preparation of an EMP before the use commences. So I do acknowledge that's a condition, proposed condition. The applicant also sought comment from Dr. Maggie Davidson and Miss Melinda Gardner, co-authors of the study, who provided a letter in response to the health and food safety concerns. There was also concerns regarding water entitlements raised, and the officers have provided the below response. The applicant had provided evidence of a civil agreement with a licence holder for the extraction of 20 megalitres of water. To use this water, a licence transfer from Southern Rural Water is required. Licences are issued on a yearly basis within this designated irrigation district. The applicant previously had a licence in 2022 and can apply to renew their transfer. The purpose of this review is to determine whether there is viability of the crop that is justifying the hemp-based mud brick manufacturing. And also conditions listed in the recommendation require that the hemp reach harvesting maturity before the land use commences, and that the land use must operate in conjunction with the cultivation of hemp on the land. So obviously they are the comments from officers. So with that in mind, I'll be supporting this application. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Owen. Are there any other councillors who would like to speak to this item? Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for withdrawing this item. I'm really impressed that the fact that we get so many applications that have come through in the green wedge, and there is so many times the restrictions are so stymied that you just can't do even practicable things in the area. It's really good to see that these people are looking to use it for an agricultural level business in the area, which hopefully keeps it why it's an agricultural area. It's a bit different. It's a bit challenging for the officers. I'm really pleased that they've put in so many conditions because it makes sure the applicant knows exactly where council is heading. It addresses a lot of the concerns of the objectors, and it leaves them in a position where they know that it hasn't been forgotten. It has actually been looked at in great depth. Councillor Owen expressed the exact sort of items that were real concerns about the site, but he's exactly right on the level of, they've hung in there. They're prepared to look at all those different conditions and they still want to go ahead with it. And I'm really pleased that it's going to be used for some sort of agricultural need, because quite often we have people who buy in who don't have an agricultural need to it, and then their intention is to try and change it from that to something else, only to find out they really can't. So this is really good. It's good that they're trying to use it for the purpose that it's meant for, and I'm glad that our council's got enough flexibility in this area to give something a go with a lot of conditions, but they're willing to give it a go. I hope my fellow councillors support this. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. Are there any other councillors who would like to speak? I'll ask the mover, Councillor Springfield, to sum up.
Thank you, Mayor, and I appreciate the sentiments of the councillors have shared on this item tonight. Again, it's not an easy process, this application. It hasn't been. It's gone through a lot of stringent sort of oversight and jumped through hoops, and it can be noted within all the conditions that have been placed upon it. It's also it sort of highlights the complexities too of this special use zone for the Western Port Green Wedge Management Plan down there, and raise these questions of what is a suitable crop under that amendment, under that planning scheme. And as is noted in the report, there's nothing precluding the applicant from growing hemp, or it is considered agricultural crop that would be appropriate in that zone. Perhaps that was, if we went back in time and through the Green Wedge Management Plan there, maybe there would be other considerations put towards food raising crops instead. I'm not sure, but it's not. And I think when I try to consider what my job is here as a councillor in the planning committee meeting, it's looking through the planning scheme and adopting my decision making upon how everything's weighted against that scheme. And in that, it seems relevant to me, even though sometimes these decisions aren't straightforward. Sometimes they are, but this one, I think there's a lot of due diligence done by council officers here, so I'm happy to support this moving forward, and nothing further to add. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, thanks, Councillor Springfield, and thanks all councillors for your contribution to this item. And I note the applicant is here. Like many of you, I've spoken to objectors and applicants about this issue. Everyone has been forthcoming with information, and over the years, we've had so much information about this. So I think we're all at a point where we can make a decision. In terms of this particular application, I think it looks good and it looks promising. I think hemp, particularly for construction, where we see existing materials being used at an unsustainable rate, is a really good alternative, and council should be willing to support that. And I think generally we are, but the sticking point for me for this one is the location, and I just can't support that. I think anywhere else in the Shire I would support it, and it sounds like it's probably going to get through given councillors have supported it in their comments tonight. That's okay. But I can't get past our local interpretations and our local rules of how and where we want industry to be and grow in our Shire. I take the point that, hemp growing is a rural industry and they don't need a permit to grow the hemp itself. That's fine. But what we're talking about is allowing a manufacturing to exist in the special use zone. And that's the sticking point for me. We know they can grow hemp. We know the shed's been allowed through a different process, and that's okay. But from my perspective, when I think about, the potential ramifications of this, I think you can grow hemp on that land, that's fine, but it could be manufactured in central Pakenham on South East Boulevard in an existing industrial zone. So I'm thinking about it from a manufacturing perspective. It's an industrial industry, the manufacturing of hemp. And I tried to conflate it with if it was growing cotton for producing clothes, would we allow the clothes manufacturing to take place on site in the special use zone? Because that's essentially what we're saying. Just because it grows out of the ground doesn't mean every product that comes out of it, from my perspective, should be allowed in that zone. So, yeah, it's a difficult one. I understand, you know, everyone will have their own opinion, and that's good. That's as it should be. But for me, the intent behind the special use zone, regardless of what it says, because it does allow some beef cattle farming, the intent behind it, I think, is to protect that beautiful black soil that we only have a limited amount of, to be protected for growing for food, for vegetables. And whether or not it explicitly says that, it probably doesn't. And, you know, obviously our planners disagree, and some lawyers disagree with my opinion as well. But I think, you know, I'm going to stand firm with those farmers and sort of say that this land should be for vegetable growing in best case, and maybe worst case, beef cattle or other things like that. I think the manufacturing process could be done outside the SUZ, but that's just my 2 cents, and I thank everyone for their contributions, because I understand this is a really tough one. All right, we'll put this item up for a vote. All those in favour? Against? I declare that carried. You didn't vote, are you abstaining? Okay, we note that. Can we note Councillor Cameron abstained from the vote? Thank you, councillors, for your interest in that one. All right, we'll move on. Item 5.2. Councillor Owen, I note that you have declared a conflict of interest in this next item. Sorry, just before you leave, Councillor Owen, can you please advise the chamber of your interest and leave once you've done so? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. My sibling, my sister, lives very close proximity to this application being considered by council, and I deem that I have a conflict of interest and should not participate.
Thank you. And we'll note that in the minutes. Thank you, Councillor Owen. We'll note that Councillor Owen left the chamber at 16 minutes past 7 o'clock in consideration, before we considered item 5.2. Thank you, Councillor Owen. All right. Item 5.2, T210341 PA, use and development of the land for a dwelling, outbuilding and vegetation removal at 209 Bergland Road, Beaconsfield Upper. The officer recommendation is that council resolve to refuse to grant a permit for planning permit application T210341, subject to the grounds noted in the officer report. Do I have a mover for item 5.2? I see Councillor Radford. Thank you, Councillor Radford.
Thank you. I move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for this item? Councillor Ross. Councillor Radford to speak first.
Thank you. Yes, I'm happy to support the officer's recommendation. I'm basing this really on the loss of the biodiversity, the extensive levels of biodiversity loss that seeks to remove over 283 trees and shrubs that require planning approval across an area of 7,000 square metres. There's also concern about the potential development advantage from the past unlawful removal of vegetation and works to create access. So one of the great things about our Shire is the nature that we have around us, all the trees, the animals that live within these trees, and we go to great lengths to protect that. I do understand, you know, in occasions that trees may need to be removed, but in this case, I think this is a bit too many trees, 283, and so for that reason, I agree with the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Councillor Radford. We'll go to Councillor Ross as a seconder.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Radford, withdrawing this item. I agree with the officers. I frequently go up to Cockatoo around that area, and I've seen what happens when you pull too many trees down. You might only pull down 4 trees in a certain area, and it just changes everything from how the development of the root system on the neighbouring properties changes, particularly on hilly areas, and those sort of things. Water patterns change under the ground, and to take out that many trees, that would have to have some sort of a response in that area, and also on the makeup of the soil and the ground and the trees and the flora and fauna that live in that area. It's a shame that they couldn't come to a better solution for this, but that is a hell of a lot of trees, 283 trees. And I don't know how you just go and put more trees in to make up for those sort of things. It is really an overdevelopment of this. and I'll be supporting the refusal on those grounds. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Ross. Are there any other councillors who would like to speak to this item? I see Councillor Springfield.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, again, we have another really difficult planning application in front of us, where, you know, we've got to, for my decision making, my peace of mind, I've really got to go through the planning scheme again, which is what we're supposed to base our decisions on, and understand this, because it does have all the, you know, protocols and conditions or such that may fit into that. It also has the human element too, and I really emphasise with the applicants that have gone, you know, for a couple of years now, been on this process and journey to try and establish a planning application for habitable dwelling on that piece of land. So look, I will also, you know, support Councillor Radford and Councillor Ross here with the officer's recommendation on the balance of what I think is the correct decision to make under the planning scheme. It's not easy, because I do fully feel for the applicants who want to build a house on this land that they've brought, and they would like to have a dream of this area here. But the problem is, and I know this too well from being in the hills and representing the Rangers Ward, there's so many nuances when it comes to, you know, rural conservation zone and green wedge zone, you know, and it's and down to in a nutshell, there's not a right of use for a dwelling to be built in these zones. Your neighbouring property might have a low density residential, and they wouldn't, you know, they don't necessarily need an application just for that, because there's a right of use in a residential zone. But in the rural conservation zone, as is outlined in the papers here, you know, it has to be considered against the intent and the purpose of the zone, which, if, you know, perhaps there's an application that could come in the future that was to build something that completely complemented and enhanced the biodiversity in that area, that might tick those boxes, but it's not a guarantee that, you know, to remove so much vegetation in that environmentally significant area to build a house. That's the provision of that. I just encourage all residents out there in future considerations to really understand what the planning overlays may pertain to your property, because it can be very difficult to obtain the correct permissions to build a habitable dwelling if it's never been established before in this type of landscape. So I will support Councillor Radford and the officer's recommendation, but I do so with a heavy heart. So thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Springfield. Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I do support the recommendation of the planning team today. I note that this application has been to CFA and it's been to DECA for approvals, and they had no objections. Amazing as that may seem, with the amount of removal of vegetation, just shows you how sometimes these recommendations to outside authorities don't see the can I say the forest for the trees. So it's because this block of land has a BMO on it, as a bushfire management overlay. It's also got environmental significance overlay, so it's got many overlays on this block that we have to look at, and I can understand where the planners have looked into this so deeply. It's a very large footprint, the block of land. The actual house itself is a huge footprint on that land area, and many outbuildings as well, which has got it in there as well. This block of land has got a bit of history of illegal removal of vegetation of years gone by, back in the 2016 era. So it's got a little bit of history in that regard. But I know that the applicant has also had the opportunity to move the south side of the house to not to where they want it to go, but to somewhere else in the area that may have been supported more by the planners in that time, but elected to leave it where it's sitting now. So it was their choice. So sometimes we have to look at these things as setting a precedent for past applications, the same sort of applications that have been haven't been approved before, and future applications that are under this same circumstance. Where do we stop and start with these things? So I support my fellow councillors and the planners on this particular item. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Moore. Are there any other councillors that wish to speak to this item? There being none, I'll go to Councillor Radford to sum up.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, councillors, for your comments on this item. Yes, I was going to highlight in summary that in February 2024, the applicant application was amended to make modifications to bushfire management measures, and consent was ultimately provided by DECA and FRV. But this still required the removal of 283 trees, which with the overlays, we have to be consistent with our decision making, as other councillors have pointed out. And so I can't support their application. I have to support the officer's recommendation. I do acknowledge the human element, as Councillor Springfield has pointed out. It is always hard to make these decisions, but as I said, we have to be consistent with our decision making in the past and for the future, as Councillor Moore pointed out as well. So I just ask councillors to support the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Radford. And we now will put that very officer's recommendation up for a vote for item 5.2. All those in favour? Against? I declare that carried. Thank you. We'll now invite Councillor Owen to return to the chamber, so we'll just pause temporarily. Thank you, and we'll note in the minutes that Councillor Owen returned to the chamber at 7:25 p.m. after discussion of item 5.2. Thank you, Councillor Owen. Moving on to item 5.3, T220699 PA, use and development of the land for a dwelling and development of an agricultural building, 130 Murphy Lane, Bunyip. This application was considered by the Town Planning Committee at its meeting held on the 6th of May. At that meeting, the application was deferred for consideration at this meeting to enable further deliberations regarding the siting of the dwelling. Subsequently, the applicant has requested that the application be not considered by the committee, as the applicant intends to lodge an amended application. Therefore, the application will not be considered at this meeting tonight. So we'll move on to item 5.4, planning matters dealt with by officers under delegated authority, July 2024. The recommendation is that council note the report. Can I have a mover for this one, please? I see Councillor Radford.
I move the officer's recommendation to note the report.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Moore. Councillor Radford, please.
Thank you. This report just provides an update on the status of active planning scheme amendments and planning scheme amendment requests that have been received, which our residents can read through on this report, and I have nothing further to add. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to Councillor Moore as a seconder.
Thank you, Mayor. I've got much more to add. I just like to just support this as the recommendation. Thank you.
Are there any other councillors who would like to speak to this item? I'll ask Councillor Radford to sum up, please.
Thank you. Nothing further to add.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Radford. We'll now put item 5.4 up for a vote. All those in favour? Against? I declare that carried. Item 5.5, Planning Matters VCAT Report, July 2024. The recommendation is that council note the report. Do I have a mover, please? Councillor Springfield.
I move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Cameron. Councillor Springfield to speak first.
Thank you, Mayor. And just in quick summary, the following report is presented to keep council informed of applications that are currently subject of appeals proceedings and and recent decisions from the Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal. And you'll see a number of things listed there. And if I go through to the end, I can see that the one recent decision was upheld by VCAT, which upheld council's decision, which is always good to see, because that we try to make in line with what is the best decision making against the planning scheme we're presented with. We try to keep things in line. I think this council does a good job of that, so it's always good to see when that is reaffirmed by VCAT's upholding of that. But I always encourage applicants to, or objectors, if the decision's made from this council town planning committee meeting, that they should take it to VCAT if they feel that we've made the wrong decision. And I'm always happy to have our decisions tested by the Victorian Tribunal there, because I think that only holds weight to it, or it's judged by magistrates. It's a superior authority, and if they seem fit to overturn a council meeting, then I fully respect that too. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Springfield. I'll go to your seconder, Councillor Cameron.
I have nothing further to add.
Thank you. Are there any other councillors who'd like to speak? Councillor Owen, I saw first.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councillors, for withdrawing this item. I just want to talk about 195 Door Road, Pakenham, which is the use and development of land for a place of worship and vegetation removal. The report says there was a hearing in June, and I just want to provide an update in addition to what the papers say. The hearing was deferred to late October following a practice day hearing held last month which was June, with the applicant and other parties. The applicant requested more time to prepare their case as they only engaged legal representation after compulsory conference. And we understand they are also engaging expert witnesses. The tribunal was persuaded that the only party that would be prejudiced was the applicant and supported the request to defer. So that hearing will be heard for a practice hearing in October. I can confirm Glossop Town Planning are representing council in this matter. Obviously I just want to provide, that's provided a lot of discussion in previous council town planning meetings, and I've had a lot of correspondence from abutting residents. So I look forward to that appearing before VCAT in October. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. Councillor Moore, would you like to?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I was going to mention that one, but thank you, Councillor Ryan, for bringing that up, as well as I did want to mention there's a use and development of a childcare centre that we approved to grant a permit here in this building for construction and display of signs at 43 Hope Street in Bunyip. It's the only one in Bunyip Ward at the minute. The hearing date is on the 26th of August this year, so it's been brought up to VCAT by one of the objectors. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you for advising us of that. Are there any other speakers to this item? There being none, I'll go back to Councillor Springfield to sum this up, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I have nothing further to add.
Thank you. We'll now put item 5.5 up for a vote. All those in favour? Against? I declare that carried. Thank you, councillors. Item 5.6, Planning Scheme Amendment Activity Report, July 2024. And of course, the officer recommendation is that we note the report. Do I have a mover for item 5.6, please? We'll let it lapse. No, I see Councillor Radford. Thank you, Councillor Radford, for moving this item.
I move the officer's recommendation to note the report.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Moore. Councillor Radford to speak first.
Thank you. So this report just outlines the matters that have been dealt with under delegated powers since the last report to council. This report is for July 2024. I have nothing further to add. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Radford. We'll go to your seconder, Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mayor. I have nothing else to add. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Are there any other councillors who would like to speak to this item? I see Councillor Springfield.
Look, just quickly, Mayor, because I think there might be some seems like confusion between what's on my papers of 5.6 and what you originally read out with those planning schemes. Just want to make sure, just for our due diligence, that we're all voting on the correct thing.
Item 5.6, you're correct. Planning matters dealt with by officers under delegated authority. I think I read the wrong title.
Yes. Okay. Fantastic. Good. Then happy to support. Thank you, Mayor.
Great. Thank you. Well, good pick up. Good to see we're all on our toes. Are there any other councillors who would like to speak to item 5.6, regardless of its title? No, that's okay. All right. We'll go to Councillor Radford to sum up, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Springfield. I obviously wasn't listening. I was just reading ahead what you were going to read, so apologies for that as well. I have nothing further to add. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you, councillors. We'll now put item 5.6 up for a vote. All those in favour? Against? I declare that carried. All right. Thank you, councillors. That concludes tonight's meeting, and I would like to declare the meeting closed at 7:34 p.m. Thank you.